Welcome everyone. Today, I'm going to tell you the true story behind 6 mysterious and unexplained deaths, a story that remains unsolved to this day. And yes, I'll be showing you real photos and videos related to this chilling case. This all happened on August 9, 1993. A group of Ukrainian rafters began a journey down a river in southern Siberia. They were headed toward a beautiful mountain range called Kamardaban. As they paddled downstream, they entered a dense forest. The river flowed right through the middle of it, surrounded by thick, untouched wilderness. At first, everything seemed peaceful. But after traveling a few kilometers, they noticed something strange in the forest to their left. At first, they thought it might be an animal moving through the trees. But as they got closer, they realized it wasn't an animal at all. It was a young girl around 17 or 19 years old standing alone in the middle of the forest. What was a teenage girl doing alone in such a remote, wild place? The group immediately sensed something was wrong. They steered their raft toward the shore and got out to check on her. From a distance, they could see she was wearing a jacket. But the jacket was completely soaked in blood. The group was shocked. Had something terrible happened? They called out to her. "What's your name? Why are you here alone? Are you hurt?" But the girl didn't respond. She just stood there terrified, silent, and frozen. The group realized something horrifying. If that much blood had come from her, she wouldn't be alive. So whose blood was it? They moved closer, trying to talk to her again. It was clear this girl had been through something traumatic, but she wasn't saying a word. The group decided to stop their journey and take her back to the city. Her name was Valentina Achevska and she was 17 years old. She was a mountain hiker. Just a few days earlier, she had gone on an expedition with 6 other people, a total of 7 hikers, into the Kamardaban Mountains. But something terrifying and unexplainable happened during their trip. And now Valentina was the only one left alive. So who were the others? What happened to them? And how did only Valentina survive? That's the story I'm going to reveal to you today. But before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, scroll down and hit that subscribe button. If you love mysterious, creepy, and true stories like this one, make sure to click the bell icon too so you don't miss what's coming next. Now, let's get into the video. So, on August 2nd, Valentina and the other 6 members of her group began their journey, 7 people in total. As I mentioned earlier, they were heading to climb the beautiful Kamardaban mountain range in southern Siberia. Let me introduce the rest of the group. The leader of the expedition was a woman named Lyudmila Korovina, aged 41. She was a professional mountaineer and also trained beginners in mountain climbing. Next was Tatiana Filipenko, a 24-year-old woman. She was the oldest among the rest of the group, but she didn't have much experience with mountain climbing. Then there was Alexander Kryson, a 23-year-old man. He was the second most experienced climber in the group and had solid mountaineering skills. The remaining 4 members were all teenagers under the age of 20. One of them was Denis, aged 19. Interestingly, Denis's parents didn't even know he was going on this trip because they weren't home when he left. He didn't get permission from them. Instead, he left a note on the fridge that said, "Mom, Dad, I'm going on a trip. I'll be back on this date. Don't worry or panic." Another member was Victoria, aged 16. Then there was Timur, a 15-year-old boy. He was from the local area and had good experience climbing in that region. And finally, we have Valentina, who we talked about earlier. She was 17 years old, also from the same village, and had strong mountaineering experience. She was used to doing physical work at home, so she was in great shape, strong and capable. Before the group set off, their leader Korovina checked the weather forecast. Everything looked clear, no signs of bad weather. So, on the morning of August 2nd, the group officially began their journey. Now, it wasn't just this group that set out on the journey. Korovina's daughter, named Natalia, was also a professional mountaineer. She had gone on a separate expedition with her own group. The plan was for both groups to take different routes, but eventually meet up at a specific location after a few days. With that plan in place, Korovina's group began their journey. But just a few hours into the hike, something unexpected happened. Heavy rain started pouring down, something Korovina hadn't anticipated at all. Even though we might not have experience with this, Korovina did. And based on her knowledge, she realized something terrifying. A snowstorm might be coming next. They had checked the weather before leaving and everything looked fine. But now, the weather had completely changed. The group wasn't prepared for such intense rain, let alone a snowstorm. At this point, they were on a mountain called Kanivaluk. They still had a long way to go. In fact, they had only just begun their journey. Despite the worsening conditions, the group kept moving forward for 2 more days in the heavy rain. Then, on August 4th, Korovina's worst fear came true. The snowstorm hit. Snow began to fall heavily. The group was now exhausted, freezing, and completely exposed to the elements. And remember, Natalia, Korovina's daughter, was supposed to meet them with her group. But because of the sudden weather change, that meeting never happened. The 2 groups missed each other entirely. Eventually, Korovina's group found an open clearing ahead. At that clearing, the group set up camp. It was freezing cold outside, but inside the tent, they finally had a chance to warm up. They rested, ate some food, and got a bit of sleep. The next morning, they prepared to continue their journey. But Korovina realized something important: they couldn't go on like this. So she gathered the group and explained the situation. She told them, "Let's head back down the mountain. We'll return another day when the weather is better." But sadly, none of them would make it back down alive. Just a few minutes into their descent, Alexander, who had been completely fine, started stumbling. His legs gave out and he looked like he was about to collapse. They had only just resumed their journey after resting and eating. So what was happening to Alexander? The others rushed to check on him, and what they saw terrified them. Foam started coming out of his mouth. Then, within seconds, blood began pouring from his eyes, ears, and nose. He collapsed to the ground in agony. No one could understand what was happening. Just moments ago, he was perfectly fine. Korovina immediately took charge. She told the 2 other boys, Chryson and Timur, to take the rest of the group and head down the mountain as fast as possible to get help. Now, only Korovina stayed behind with Alexander. The remaining 5 began their descent, but it wasn't easy. Snow was falling heavily and the cold was brutal. As they struggled down the slope, they suddenly heard Korovina screaming from above. But Alexander was the one who had fallen ill. So why was Korovina screaming? Fearing something had gone wrong, the 5 rushed back up the mountain. When they got there, they saw a horrifying sight. Alexander was dead, and nearby, Korovina had collapsed too. She was bleeding from her mouth, eyes, ears, and nose, just like Alexander. She had died the same way. Can you imagine? 2 people in the group dead within minutes in the exact same terrifying way. The rest of the group was in shock. They didn't know what to do. Then, just minutes later, Victoria began foaming at the mouth. Blood started pouring from her eyes, ears, and nose. Timur collapsed next. He was in so much pain, he began tearing off his clothes. The others could only watch in horror. Valentina ran to help Victoria. But suddenly, Victoria grabbed Valentina's arm violently, like she was possessed. Seeing this, Dennis panicked and ran away in fear. Within minutes, Victoria and Timur were both dead, just like Alexander and Korovina. Then it started happening to Tatiana. She collapsed to the ground, screaming. She also began ripping off her clothes as if she was burning from the inside or being exposed to radiation. Blood poured from her eyes, ears, and nose. She crawled across the ground in agony. Then began banging her head against a rock. I think you can imagine what happened next. Something had clearly happened. Something so painful that the only escape seemed to be death. That's why Tatiana began smashing her head against a rock. And eventually, she too died. In less than an hour, this group of 7 healthy hikers had been reduced to just 2 survivors. 5 were already dead. Meanwhile, Dennis, who had earlier tried to run away, returned. He had no idea where else to go. But as soon as he came back, the same thing began happening to him. He collapsed in pain just like the others. Dennis started to suspect that maybe some supernatural force was behind all of this. Even though he was in agony, he tried to escape, but he couldn't. He fell to the ground. And within seconds, he too was dead. Now, only one person remained. 17-year-old Valentina. What must have been going through her mind at that moment? We can't even imagine. She was terrified. She ran, almost like she'd gone mad, back toward their camp. She grabbed whatever food and supplies she could find, and fled. For the next few days, Valentina wandered aimlessly, completely traumatized. She had no idea where she was going. She had just watched all 6 of her teammates die in the most horrifying way, right in front of her eyes. Eventually, she was found by that Ukrainian rafting group. And now we understand why she was so terrified, why her jacket and her entire body was covered in blood. The rafters took her back to the city. But even then, Valentina couldn't speak. She was in deep shock. It took 2 full weeks before she was able to explain what had happened to her group. After she told her story, a search team was sent to recover the bodies. They found the corpses scattered across the area. Some here, some there. And strangely, none of the bodies had eyes. It was as if their eyes had melted away. Some of the bodies had already begun to decompose, and insects were crawling out of them. It was a horrifying sight. No one could believe what had happened. What really went on up there? That's the question I'll try to answer in just a moment. The bodies were sent for autopsy. The official report claimed the cause of death was hypothermia and protein deficiency. But that explanation doesn't make sense. Let's break it down. Hypothermia means death from extreme cold. Protein deficiency means they didn't have enough food or nutrients. But neither of those explanations fit. Remember, they had just rested the night before. They had food, they had warmth inside the tent. They weren't starving. They weren't exposed to unbearable cold. So how could they have died from hypothermia or starvation? And what about the symptoms? They ripped off their clothes, as if they were going insane. They foamed at the mouth, then bled from their eyes, ears, and nose. Tatiana even smashed her head against a rock to escape the pain. None of those symptoms match hypothermia or protein deficiency. So what really happened? That's where the real mystery begins. Why did 6 people die in such a bizarre, terrifying way? But Valentina, who was right there with them, survived? Some people suggested that maybe the group ate something poisonous. But that theory doesn't hold up either. They all share the same food and drinks. If it was poisoned, Valentina would have been affected too. Others suggested they might have eaten something from the forest, like a toxic mushroom or berry. That's possible, especially since Korovina was known to survive off wild plants when supplies ran low. Some wild mushrooms and berries can look harmless but cause hallucinations, internal bleeding, or even death. But again, Valentina confirmed that they didn't eat anything suspicious. They had enough food for the trip and didn't need to forage. And when investigators checked the camp, they found plenty of leftover food and supplies. And we also can't blame Korovina. She was highly experienced. It's hard to believe that she would have picked something poisonous from the forest and given it to her group, especially if she ate it herself too. So the theory that they ate something toxic from the forest doesn't quite add up. Then what really happened? Well, this is where things get even more mysterious. One of the most widely discussed theories is that the group may have been exposed to toxic gas, possibly a chemical agent. Why? Because we all know that Russia has a history of testing chemical weapons, often in secret. It's possible that this group accidentally came into contact with a classified chemical experiment. The symptoms support this theory. All of them died within minutes, showing extreme and sudden reactions. That kind of rapid effect is consistent with exposure to toxic airborne chemicals. Maybe Russia wasn't actively testing a weapon at that moment. But perhaps chemical waste or residue from a previous test had been dumped in that area. If that's the case, then the group could have unknowingly inhaled something deadly. But even this theory raises 2 big questions. 1, if it was a toxic gas, how did it affect all 6 of them? 2, but not Valentina, who was right there with them the entire time. And we also can't assume that Russia would have dumped a chemical agent in that area. Why? Because if they were disposing of something that dangerous, they'd likely choose a place where no people ever go. But the area where Valentina and her group were hiking wasn't remote or abandoned. In fact, it's a popular route. Many people travel through that region. So it's hard to believe that Russia would secretly dispose of a toxic chemical in such a well-traveled area. Which brings us back to the same question. What really happened to them? To this day, the truth remains a mystery. So what do you think happened? What caused the deaths of the others in Valentina's group? And why, no matter what happened, was Valentina the only one who survived? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We'll be back soon with another mysterious video like this one. Until then, stay safe, everyone.